NerdandSon.
Hey, welcome to the Nerd and Son podcast. I am Nerd. I am Ralph.
I'm Connor. I'm Son.
I don't even know what the hell was that?
That's it's the seven lions. It's how he does. He starts with like the finger. He does like and then he moves into the fist. Then he moves into the double fist.
Okay. See, if you're audio only, you're not getting these visuals. I'm sorry about that.
You're not getting it.
So today on this episode,
on this fine, beautiful, sunny probably day,
on this very special episode of Nerd and Son podcast.
On this special episode, this just in.
See, you got a better voice for that than I do, but on this episode, we are talking about puzzles and possibly traps.
And maybe traps. It kind of turned into traps.
Well, actually, that's one of the conversations that we had when we were offline, just on the phone with me and you talking. And I think it just depends on your view and everything on that. To me, personally, and I'll bring this up here now, puzzles and traps, to me, are the same thing. I consider them, yes, they work differently mechanically, but for what they do inside the game, I actually consider them the same thing.
As a I can't even think. Wow, we just started. I've already lost my train of thought. It's wow. Jesus Christ.
It threw you off, huh?
Okay. I'm making too much money. Okay. All right. As a mechanical setback within the game, as an obstacle, they do sit in the same kind of box.
Yeah.
The box in the toolkit, the little drawer that you pull out that has like the certain little screws. That's the same. They're in the same drawer.
Yes. Okay.
And right up top, my view of puzzles is we take that drawer, we take that drawer, and we just throw it out. Because I've been in a lot of games where the DM's tried to put a puzzle. I've tried to put a puzzle or a trap in there, and it's part of the problem is like my pass-fail binary yes-no. I don't like that. I like a little wiggle room. I like a little bit of like little wobblies, you know? And so that's why I like the Star Wars RPG narrative dice system so much. Because I like the ability to have, you passed this, but with a setback. And how, especially in D&D, which we'll get into, the trap and puzzle, it's pass fail. If you don't answer the riddle correctly that the DM pulled off the back of a cereal box, then you're not going anywhere, and you'll sit there for an entire session. Instead of fighting monsters or progressing the story, you're instead arguing with all of your other players about what the answer to this riddle could be, and that's where my problem is.
Okay, well, I think we'll get into that because I know we got a bunch of different categories and a bunch of different things about the puzzles and traps and everything we can talk about. And that's definitely something we're going to talk about, especially with my experience on introducing them into my game. Some of the reasons I did that, the good things about it, and then the very bad ones about it, because I've had the whole range of good, bad, players liking, disliking, everything like that too. So, do you want to go ahead, and I will let you start since you got your stuff at the top of the screen up here.
Yeah. Actually, the people at home can't see the notes, but I'm gonna remix it up, remix to ignition here, and just at the top, You know, I don't want to just complain about something and not have an actionable response where I'm not just going to complain without having a solution here. And my solution here that I had while we were talking about this episode offline was instead of having, like I just described, a moment where like a riddle or a puzzle had stops you in your tracks until you move on. It could be like a treasure map or some kind of like riddle prophecy kind of thing that the players get very early on in a campaign, and then it slow burns, and you keep harkening back to it. You keep reminding the players throughout just this long con until they finally figure it out. Or more realistically, sometimes they come up with a solution that's better than your initial intention. That also works.
Yes, and as a DM, you have to actually incorporate that. So, and know that, and because in the end, with all the stuff we're going to go through, it's a game. You need to enjoy the game. If you throw something out there stupid or just rough to buy time or anything like that, that makes it kind of less enjoyable for the players and everything too. So it doesn't go as well. But okay.
So now we're gonna start. We're gonna move into transition into my patented soapbox complaining about 5th Dungeons and Dragons. All right, and I've actually done my research this time. I'm not coming in blind this time. We'll get back to that next episode. All right. Mm-hmm. So, where we're pulling this is from the DMG.
Yep.
Okay. And let me get to my little. I used a receipt, and it's not opening. So on page 120 of the DMG, it has traps, and I was not around on the internet for Dungeons and Dragons Discourse when 5th edition came out. I wasn't paying attention to it, and clearly what I'm about to say, they heard because they fixed it in this book.
Oh, there's been lots of changes.
I'll get on that rant. But for this is, let's see. Yeah, for traps, which are let's be honest, a integral. When you think of D&D and you think of dungeons, which is the first D in D&D, dungeons come with traps. It's part of the entire just image of the game.
Yeah.
If you think of D&D, that version of D&D that stereotypically is portrayed, that most of us have in our head, that I have in my head when I think of a stereotypical game before I start messing with like how I want to play or whatever, it has traps. And how much does this book have about traps? The Dungeon Master's Guide? That's it.
Yes.
And in these 4 pages, is it or 3 pages without the artwork? It doesn't really say anything.
No.
Right? It says you have mechanical and magical traps. And mechanicals, you have perception check to spot, investigate to figure it out, or how the mechanism works, and a dexterity with themes tools to disarm. Or a magical trap with arcana or detect magic to spot, and an arcana or a dispel magic to disarm. Right? That's it. Very basic. It's got some examples in here, and they're very simple.
Yeah.
Very simple, very easy, and very pass-fail if you don't see it. And another thing is with these simple traps, where it's just pass fail. If you notice it, if you notice, you have to check to notice it. If you have not communicated that there is an expectation of traps, it's gonna feel really bad for the players when, oh, hey, you fell into a trap, right?
Yes.
Or they're not being careful. It's got to be part of the buy-in, part of your, part of the communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's part of what we talk about.
It is,
right?
and here's what I want to do, and I don't want to blow your mind with this, but that 3 pages, 4 pages that you see there, if you go back to previous versions, that is more than what you got in previous versions.
That's
like
wild.
for you go back to AD&D and everything like that, they'll say traps. You have mechanical, you have magical. They didn't really give you many examples or anything like that, and that's also too why the games back in the AD&D day were so deadly. They didn't have that. The other thing too, which kind of got better with the 3 and the 3.5 and 4th edition, because you had the OGLs and everything, where other people can actually go, oh, this is something that we can actually work on. Then you got a better robust thing for the actual traps themselves, which made a huge difference, because in some of the earlier games, and a lot of the earlier games that I ran, the traps and everything, they just were kind of just out there, and they were rough, where you didn't have examples, ideas, or anything else like that for them, and they just were not fun. And it did not help that they did not have any kind of actual mechanics for that in the books that we can go by. It was kind of just left up on your own. And I think with what we're going to be talking about today and the breakdown of the puzzles and traps, we'll get to things to be a lot more evolved, understanding the concepts, the way to place them, way not to place them, and everything a lot better than trying to understand it in 3 pages.
Yep. And also, here's the other thing, right? We're talking about puzzles and traps because they're in the same little drawer.
Yeah.
Do you know what? There's no puzzles in there. It
No.
doesn't say anything about puzzles. Now, here's my other rant. Rant within a rant, okay? Ready? Rantception, okay? I do not... I understand businesses and everything else, but if I bought a $60 book at my local game store because I want to support them, and one of the fundamental things in the game that is part of the image of running the game and being like part of this hobby and part of this thing here is in another $60 book, that I don't like that. Now, I like buying these books, and once every paycheck I'll go and buy, when I'm really kooky about it, I'll go and buy another book because I like seeing them all on my shelf. But I don't agree with everyone having to do that in order to get good rules for basic things.
Well, the thing too here, and I want to give them a little bit of slack on a couple things. Not everything, but the more that you have the game, and you can do a ton of playtesting and everything like that, but on the initial books, there's only so much playtesting done, even if you do it for a couple years. And then as time actually goes on, you get a lot more feedback. Then you actually can do modification, and that's where some of the books and a lot of the rule modifications come from. So I will give them some slack. I'll give them some slack on that. But there's also too, from a business aspect, where they're going, okay, we're going to only put this in this book because we're going to go ahead and expand on it in this book, so we won't cover it. So yeah, there is some business things that go on there for that, but a lot of time, over time, there's just going to be modifications, and hey, this is a better rule set to actually use.
Because there's what now 4 like little player books in and 4, and I understand that this has been a thing with previous editions, but books were also cheaper back then. That's my other point here, right? In this economy, it's highway robbery also, but good things though, right? That's my little rant there. Do I have now on this little rant? I don't have a solution because like I don't know what you can do when you have a book-based rule system and then you want to patch it, right? You can't reprint this book because then at that point you have a $60 book that is useless now, and you have to go get the new version of it. That feels worse. I feel like when you're talking about a system of books here, this is the best you can do, and I get it.
Okay. Now, for everybody who's listening to this podcast now, or a year from now, going back and listening to this podcast, a year from now, we will probably, hopefully, be in the process of publishing our first stuff to post for everybody to share, and we'll see on after that is out for a little bit if we need to go ahead and change it and update and repost a brand new version, which we probably will. So I think the concept and the idea is easier in thought than it is in actual practice.
Oh yeah, this is a rant from a consumer standpoint, not from a but now I'm off my rant here. This is now around 10 pages of trap stuff. This is from, if you're listening on the audio, this is the Xanathar's Guide to Everything. And it starts on page 113 and it ends on page 123. And there's a lot more. You have your simple traps, where now you have the elements of and it talks about the elements of the trap, where you have the level and threat, you have the trigger, you have the effect, and you have the countermeasures. Yep. Right? And this is already so much more and so many extra added bits. And then you have and you have example traps here. And you have a whole part that's all about designing sample traps or designing simple traps and how to do all that. And it's so good. It gives you the tools needed to be able to make your own traps, and it gives you a guidebook to be guidelines to go forward with your own instead of just like figure it out. Right? That's great. Wonderful.
Right. But that's where you go to.
You have...
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh. You have complex traps, too. Right? Now, you don't have those 4 elements. Now, you have level and threat, trigger, initiative, active elements, dynamic elements, constant elements, and countermeasures. Right? That's seven bits. And it has examples. I'm not going to get into examples here because there's a lot and they're pretty crazy. I don't want to bog down just by reading the book here, but it's really great. It is a really great resource, and I think the important thing is to cut back on the stressfulness and the anxiety that comes with attempting to start DMing.
Yes.
You don't, and I mean, you were, when you were a kid, you had to kind of take up that mantle because somebody had to. But you know, I came in where I had DMs and I had to, there was the stress of going, I see what they're doing. I don't know if I could do that. And it's things like that give you, here's how you do this, here is a step-by-step guide, and then once you have that step-by-step guide, then you at least have a framework that you can then deviate from if you want to. But if you want to play it by the book, here is a way you can do this, and that is great. That is awesome.
Yeah, and what is nice now, because you're talking about the books and examples and everything like that, and eventually we'll go through all of our points that we have here and go into a lot more detail. But with the puzzles and stuff and getting better and everything, when I was playing I didn't have supplements. I didn't have the internet and everything when I'm playing in the 80s, early 90s, and everything like that. So we're kind of just making stuff up as we go. And honestly, they were pretty bad. And then when the internet started hitting and I'm able to come out and actually see what other people are doing, other people posting different things, and then like I said earlier about the OGL, I carry multiple books. I have this is 3.5 or is this 3? Can't remember, but Fantasy Flight came out with a whole section of Legends and Lairs book series, and I have Traps and Treachery book 1, book 2, and I mean this is over here and stuff like that. Between the two books, I got like 130 traps, puzzles, and everything else in those books. So you get to see a lot more examples, and then you go, ooh, I like this. This may work for my game, and then you can put those into your game without having to try to think so far out. And I think one of the things that we have stress over is how we would design the trap and puzzle, which if you want to, let's go ahead and start on our points and go down, because we're trying to hit all these things that we've talked about in your rant and everything like that too. Yep. So now let's go ahead and from the rants and everything, start this out. And the first thing I have put in here in our notes is, what is a good puzzle? Okay, and to me, and I'm going to preference this, puzzles and traps to me are the same. I've already mentioned that too, so I think these works for both of them. Okay, but to me, what is a good puzzle? A puzzle is good if it's going to challenge the character and not necessarily the player. Okay, an example that I have here is if you give them a bad puzzle and it ends up being like just a math puzzle. Okay, if you have a character which is a barbarian, technically character wise he's not going to solve that, but the player might actually be an accountant, math genius. He could be able to figure it out. So that to me is not a good puzzle at all. Okay, because that's just a time waster at that particular point. A good puzzle to me is one that is fitting of the game. Okay, the players are trying to get to a treasure that is locked behind a secret door. Okay, then based on the game itself, the environment, how are the locks and the challenge rating for that? Not the challenge rating, but the challenge for that door. What is the level that the person that is trying to protect the items behind the door willing to go to trap it so nobody can get into it? And then if they set the traps off, is it actually relevant to the actual game instead of just doing something weird to be on weird's sake? So yeah, I think that should all come into play in an account. And then also when you're designing a good puzzle or a trap, have it to where it's not necessarily a skill check, but almost a thought process for the actual player to try to actually figure out. But if they do get stuck, then they can have skill checks to help offset some of that challenge and to get additional clues. But ultimately, making the puzzle to where it's simple enough that it's fun for the players, but not difficult enough to roadblock them on getting over.
While you were talking, I had the idea. I thought of it's when you were talking about a challenge to the character and not the player.
Right.
I thought of if you are like how I DM and I talk about things through and I make it very character focused and narrative based. A good trap could make a character choose, right? And there's a scene I think of from the Harley Quinn TV show, the cartoon one. It's great. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. But there's a scene, spoilers I guess, where they set up a trap where they have Batman and Harley over acid. And the Joker is forced to choose which one he wants to save and which one he wants to drop in the acid. Right? And it's played up as you know, it's but you can use something like that where the character has, you could have I remember I played a goblin sorcerer who was greedy, right? He would set off traps that I knew as a player were clearly traps just because, ooh, shiny, right?
Right.
You could set up, if he's clearly greedy, you could have a trap in which a character is in danger. And you can either save that character or get the treasure. And you could put that as a choice for that character.
Yeah,
for that.
And honestly, we go down here. Yeah, I mean, it could be that. I mean, because at that particular point, what would make that a good puzzle is you are actually having that for the player itself. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it actually ties them into different things too. But also too, on the flip side, which that's one of the notes on down here, that could actually be a bad thing, because at that particular point, what if the player does not actually find it fun to actually make a choice like that? Because yeah, you're going to have, do I want to lose the love of my life, Harley Quinn, or do I want to lose the meaning of my life, my adversary, Batman?
He chose to say Batman, by the way. That was the...
Yeah, so that was... that's not really a choice the player, I think, actually would like to make. So you have to be very careful on everything on those too. And I think that would go towards what a bad puzzle would be, okay? So I mean,
and I think this is a very good dichotomy between us, right? Because I think because how I play and how I run games, very narrative focused, such a character choice that is defining for a character, you know, save a person or get the treasure. That really really forces the player to choose, what is this character like? Mm-hmm. What is the character of this character?
Yes, but that depends on the actual narrative of the game.
That's the shit I live for in this game. In doing this hobby, that's the kind of shit that I love. I once played a character, and this is in that the campaign I've talked about, where I was in on it with the DM, and like we were co-conspirators, and at one point we had gotten to the villain's lair, and it was the big reveal of who this villain was, and it was like this person that we had been that was like a benefactor to us and a mentor to one of the characters, and my character wanted power, and we had found this mask that was like calling to me and like calling to my character, and like it was a mask that was clearly the character had a choice of put on this mask and clearly become evil but get more power, or stay with, you know, my friends and my companions.
Yeah.
I took the mask.
Yeah, but how did that, and let me ask you a question, how did that actually benefit your group?
I don't care. Because how it benefited was the story, right? Uh-huh. It moved the story forward. I had life stuff go on, so I couldn't be in the game. After that point, things had happened, and my character became the villain of the next arc.
Well, that would make sense if you're not able to play, because then you build that into the story.
No, because we hadn't planned that. We hadn't planned that out. that things came up and I couldn't play anymore. But how it benefits is, and this is a good difference in our views on this, because I couldn't care less how character things affect the group and our the efficacy of how our group dynamic works.
Yes.
Because it is good for the story, it is good for the plot, it is, to use the old moniker that is used for evil many times, it's what my character would do.
Well, that's okay, but I'm taking it from a DM aspect where having an individual focus on a individual choice kind of takes the others out of the whole setting, the game and everything like that.
I'm talking about a small dichotomy in this one huge reveal. Yeah. There were several things. Every character in that had a choice to make and had crazy things happen, and that this was not a oh, I'm the main character, right? I am telling the story as if I am a main character because it was my character, and I just, this was, a relevant example here of like a character choice.
I know, but I'm just trying to think from a DM aspect, honestly, that is horrible. But
I don't know about that. See, from a DM, it sounds like from a power gaming aspect, that's horrible.
Yeah.
Right? And it's all about what your focus on, your focus is when you're playing a game, because if you're playing to have it like be the like, if you're playing a little skirmish war game in your RPG, then yeah, you're gonna worry about, oh well, do I have the optimal stats? Do I have the optimal loadout for everything? But if you're doing it as a story, as a collaborative story in an RPG form, then it's all about where you're coming at it from.
It is. So I can see where you're coming from, but I also, from my viewpoint and running games, I have a lot of issues with that directly. But it's also good why we have different views on the way we think about this here too. Because let's go ahead and we'll take that into the next section.
You know what? No, you're wrong. I'm right. I'm done with it.
Cool. Plop. In the stream. That's great. Okay. He has issues. Okay, but that's beside the point. Okay, well, let's go ahead and let's set this into the bad thing, and I'll go off on my side of why it's a bad puzzle. Let's go through bad puzzles, okay? What actually makes a bad puzzle, okay? Honestly, using converted puzzles. Like, for example, if you go to a dollar store and you get one of the big puzzle logic books, okay?
Yep.
Trying to convert that over into something in your game, that's bad. Just because it's just a time waster. It doesn't have really anything to do with your game. You're just throwing something stupid in there on that too. Something we mentioned earlier, which is bad, is math equations. Why did we just learn to do math equations just to waste time? Okay. The other thing too is the puzzles from a DM aspect, ones that like what you were talking about, way you were describing it from a DM, I kind of think that unless this is the last session of the actual game itself and everybody's going to agree that everybody's going to do win-loss and stuff like that, that'd be great. But for an ongoing campaign, having something like you described happen right in the center, if all the players are going to stay together, that to me would be horrible. That just ruins the whole group dichotomy and everything together. But if you have a player, like your example, that couldn't play anymore and that was already known, and doing something like that, that would actually work out fine. I don't have an issue with that. So it really depends on the actual situation and everything like that from my particular perspective. So yeah, so I mean that really does. And this is also coming from me running a lot of bad puzzles. I have done a lot of fails, and a lot of the stuff that I put in here is from my own experience and failing at it. And it's a lot harder than what you would think, and it's just because you're trying to overthink things instead of making things simpler. So a bad puzzle to me also is one that's completely overthought, okay? And sometimes when you overthink them, you make puzzles that the players just cannot figure out, and that's not good. And a puzzle is also bad is when you don't give out the proper clues. Say, oh, you missed that. Oh, you didn't pay attention to something happened 6 game sessions ago. You don't give them little clues.
Keeping better notes.
Yeah, that's no fun, because then they're going to go, what? No, I'm not going to do that. So kind of know your players to know how to do things, okay? And the other thing, too, for a very bad puzzle is do not keep the clues to solve the puzzle gated behind skill checks.
Absolutely.
So if you come across a puzzle and you're going to initially try to do that with a skill check and you fail a skill check, well, you just failed the entire puzzle. What's the point of having it? So having them designed like that is not really good. So that kind of makes a bad puzzle.
And this also, these last 2 bits also work when you're doing mysteries. Like a murder mystery or something like that, which is a puzzle in itself, just stretched out over the session, right?
Right.
Could be, but the thing that's important is these are key important things to keep in mind. Is you don't want to just gatekeep information, right? Because it's hard. It is hard for the players, because you have to realize that you, as the DM, behind on your ivory tower, looking down from your screen at the rest of the table, you have all the information and they don't.
Exactly.
And so it can be easy when you're looking at all the pieces on the board and go at this one point and you go, well, of course, this connects to this because this is happening over here. But if they don't have the context of everything else, then these 2 pieces of information seem completely random. And, of course, this is all abstracted because its mileage may vary on all this stuff. But it's important to keep in mind when you're doing puzzles, when you're doing any sort of thing where you have the knowledge and they don't, keep in mind that they don't know what you know.
Exactly, because you have because you did all the planning and everything. So, well, let's go into the next section when we're talking about that. Let's talk about the design. Mm-hmm. Okay, so for design, we'll go ahead and get that here. Is, to me, a good puzzle trap makes sense with the game. Mm-hmm. Okay, if it's environmental, have it something associated with your environment. Your forest, a wooden trap, everything like that. I mean, just don't make something weird just for weird's sake to be difficult. Have it kind of fit in with everything that's kind of going on.
Unless you're doing one of those like weird dungeons, like, because that is a whole nother thing.
Well, that is, if you go into, like, for example, your campaign revolves around a psychotic, crazy ass mage, and everything like that. So you already know he's off the rucker. He can do whatever, stuff like that. But that's what I'm saying.
It makes sense within the game.
That makes sense in the game. If you're just doing that randomly, then it doesn't make any sense at all. So, yeah. I don't know. Some of the stuff that they did in the AD&D, and you go back to some of those older games, it's just like, oh, it is terrible. I mean, as much as I love the classic Tomb of Horrors and the Return to Tomb of Horrors, Return to Tomb of Horrors in the 3rd edition, love those games just because of the nostalgia. When I go back and I really look at them, and when I was trying to run them and stuff like that, there was a lot of difficulty because it just didn't make sense.
Well, I'm pretty sure, if I'm remembering correctly, Tomb of Horrors was created specifically as a fuck you, like to his players.
Yes.
I can't remember who came up with it. I don't know if it's Gary Gygax or someone else, but it makes sense within the game, within the context of fuck you.
Yeah. But yeah, today's games and doing a long game session, it's just not really in the works anymore. It's just not, it just doesn't work because you kind of want the characters to be able to grow, to evolve, not unless you're doing a specific game where the characters are not important and you can go ahead and swap out your characters all the time. But your players and everything would have to agree, and that all be up front before you actually get into the game. Like a Shadow Dark campaign. The campaign that I am listening to and watching him designed from by Sly Flourish. Excellent stuff, but it's very, very old school in the way they do things, and their characters are swapped out all the time because, I mean, it's very, very brutal. But as long as your players know that up front, then that's okay. But for a long-term game, then that can be a lot more difficult. Now, the other thing in design is know what your players can and can't do as characters, okay? So if you design it, don't make it difficult for them, but also know that, hey, does the mage know mage hand, okay? Do they have zone of truth, okay? So if you can find out who's lying real quick, okay? What is the number of players that you have? If it's a complex button trap where 4 or 5 buttons, you design something where 5 buttons have to be pushed at once and you only have 3 players, okay. Yeah, stupid things like that. Know what you have that you're working with and design it around there, okay. And the other thing is too, from a design aspect, it doesn't have to be difficult. I think a lot of problems that they have, especially I had as a DM, is I try to overthink it. It is overly complicated because I'm trying to account for everything. And you don't really have to do that. Honestly, the simpler is better if you just take into account, okay, what can I do that they can't do Mage Hand? What can I do that is Zone of Truth? Because Mage Hand only does up to so much weight. So have something a little bit heavier. Little things like that goes a long way, and the simpler a lot of times is better, okay. And also from a trap and design is know your actual game, okay. And what I mean by that is way you're actually describing it, because if me and you are playing a game right now, we are over the video like we are here, and I'm in Ohio, you're in Hawaii, I have to design
it. Dox us.
Yeah. I have to design it as a theater of the mind. So I have to make sure that I am explaining it, how it looks, how it works, how it operates, and then also make sure that I am describing it properly. Because if I describe it wrong to you in the theater of the mind setup, then that just doesn't work at all, okay? Yeah. Or if everybody's local and in a local table, then know that you can design it by just drawing it out or using props and stuff like that. Know how you're running your game and what actually works the best, and that actually helps out with the design of the actual puzzle and trap, okay? So, I mean, honestly, that's my biggest things about design. Do you have anything on this design, or?
It is really easy to get caught up, like you said, and trying to make things complicated, because when you have the top-down perspective of everything, you can go, oh, it's that same thing of you have all the information, and it is imperative that you keep in mind that your players don't have all the information. And what seems really simple to you could be very complicated to them.
Exactly. Hello, this is Nerd Ralph, and just wanted to cut in here at the end of the episode just to let you know that I have, during the editing process, decided to go ahead and to cut this into 2 episodes just due to its sheer length and everything. So, with that, I do appreciate you guys listening or watching, depending on how you see this or hear this, very much. And with that, we will be next week back with the second half of the episode. Until then, I want to say thank you all very much, and you have yourself a wonderful, wonderful day.